So, back in the early 2000s, when DVD was starting to become more prevalent, our household still had a ton of VHS tapes. So, growing up in the early 2000s, I have a lot of nostalgia for VHS tapes still. This is the type of media that I grew up with compared to DVDs. And with that, an obsession began. So, Godzilla on VHS is something that I find very, very fascinating compared to a lot of other movies. While a lot of other movies might have the exact same pictures or titles compared to their DVD counterparts or Blu-ray counterparts, Godzilla's kind of in this weird other space. For example, I find the art of Godzilla VHS tapes to be very fascinating. So for instance, with this was one of the original re-releases of the original Godzilla King of the Monsters starring Raymond Burr. This is in black and white, but on the cover, he's that traditional green and he kind of looks a little weird in my opinion. There's some cool ones too, like Rodan, for example, here has a lot of original artwork. You can see a lot of the paintings here done. It looks pretty darn cool. And the back is boring. But that's what I find most fascinating about some of these is that the artwork. So for instance, also here is Destroy All Monsters, available for the first time on home video, it says, which this is still the only other way you can watch Destroy All Monsters. I believe besides the new Criterion Blu-ray collection, this and the DVD release of Destroy All Monsters is the only one available. But it was still pretty cool. So for example, on a lot of these Godzilla tapes or DVDs, you would be able to see which monsters were all in it. So for instance, here on the copyright, you'd be able to see, for instance, in Destroy All Monsters, Godzilla, Mothra, King Ghidorah, Rodan, Gorosaurus, Anguirus, Kumonga, Manda, Manila, Baragon, and Varan. But it was super cool. Anytime, I would get a new tape or a new DVD of Godzilla, I would always look on the back and be like, oh, what's the new copyright logo, and it'd be really cool to see that. One of my favorite Godzilla VHS tapes and sort of little knowledge bits is the Godzilla vs. Biollante home video release. The original was actually released by HBO Max and Dimension Films and Miramax. So, for example, this version of Godzilla vs. Biollante was in Disney's own franchise properties that they owned at the time. They owned the English dub version of Godzilla vs. Biollante. And with this copy of Biollante compared to a lot of other copies of Biollante, you get some original artwork here. So for example, I always stated in my Godzilla vs. Biollante Zetheroni episode that this cover art always scared me as a kid. So this was always something that, it was like, the scary movie, I'm watching. I always just kind of preferred this poster as compared to the live action Heisei poster of this movie. That goes for a lot of the Heisei era posters. I think a lot of these are works of art right here, and they should be preserved. However, with this release, this was one of the final ways that you could watch one of the Godzilla movies on home video here in America, because this was one of the last ones released in America with an American dub for a very long time. Now, that changed once Sony Pictures acquired the rights and started releasing some of the Heisei era Godzilla movies. But as you can see, they changed it up. They have their own titles. They don't have the Heisei era art. For instance, Godzilla vs. Mothra is now titled Godzilla vs. Mothra: The Battle for Earth. I think TriStar did a very good job of bringing these movies over once the 50th anniversary of Godzilla was available. However, the bad thing is these VHS copies are a little more rare as compared to the DVD version because these were special orders. You could not find these in the store, I believe. Now, you could find DVD copies of these. For example, Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla 2, you could easily find a standalone DVD copy of this. However, something like Godzilla vs. Space Godzilla or Godzilla vs. Mothra Battle for Earth was available in a double disc DVD copy, which is how I originally first watched these. So for instance, Godzilla vs. Space Godzilla was bundled with Godzilla vs. Destroyer, and Godzilla vs. Mothra Battle for Earth was bundled with Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah. So for me, it's kind of fascinating to see these movies by themselves and not in their own double disc DVD copy, so it's pretty cool to see this. Now, there are a ton of ways to watch Godzilla on VHS. There's all sorts of different releases of not only the original copy, but also multiple different copies of other movies. So for example, this is a VHS collection of Godzilla movies, and when you fit them all together, they make a picture of Godzilla 1985. Very cool in my opinion. However, these were released by Star Maker, I believe, and these include their own weird little artwork. For example, this is Godzilla vs. Gigan. This is Godzilla 1985. Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah, or Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster. Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla, the first one, and then Son of Godzilla. Just very cool in my opinion. They made some of these different editions. So for example, I think there's one that includes Godzilla vs. Megalon instead of maybe Son of Godzilla, and they still make the same picture. However, it's just pretty cool that there's so many different releases of these movies. So you're not going to get the same quality over and over again, but you're definitely going to get different cover art, different logos, different backgrounds. It's pretty cool when you start up one of these tapes, in my opinion. So for example, here is the copy of Godzilla 1985, and here is another copy I have of Godzilla 1985. They're both very different. So for example, this copy of Godzilla 1985 is just a simple slipcover for the video, while this is a clamshell copy of it released by New World Pictures. They're both the exact same movie. There's nothing that's different other than when the startup logos happen. I think they were released by different companies, so that's going to be different. The picture's the same, all that quality, it's the same dub. What's cool about this, though, is I believe for the longest time, Godzilla 1985 was the only way you could watch The Return of Godzilla without bootlegging it, basically. There was never a way to watch the Japanese edition of The Return of Godzilla for the longest time. So for example, this is the theatrical re-release with an English dub and includes new scenes with Raymond Burr. He came back. This is sort of like a pseudo sequel to the original King of the Monsters, which I always really enjoy. Sure, it's a little cheesy, some of the added scenes, but you know, when it comes to reused footage or added footage to a lot of the Americanized versions of Godzilla, it's kind of cool to compare and contrast, see which one's better. You know, I'm not one of those people that think that the Japanese edition is the only edition you should enjoy. I think that it's pretty cool that there are two completely separate editions of one movie, in my opinion. I think that's really neat with the original copy, the original edition of Godzilla of 1985, or Godzilla, The Return of Godzilla, as well as with Godzilla 2000, there's different versions of that movie as well. But now what would be the point of this without showing off just a little bit? I do have some sealed copies of Godzilla on VHS. So for example, here I have Godzilla and Mothra, The Battle for Earth. This is a sealed copy compared to this copy that's open, so I can enjoy it while having a very nice sealed copy of it, which is pretty neat in my opinion. This is the widescreen edition of the 1998 Godzilla film, the one that's released by Sony, you know, the creators of Independence Day, the one that he looks like a lizard that not a lot of people like. I actually have a lot of nostalgia for this movie. Yeah, it is the black sheep of the Godzilla franchise, not a lot like it. It's not a Godzilla movie. However, I think it's best put by what the director of -1 said, where it's not a Godzilla movie, but it's a really good monster flick at the end of the day. And, you know, if this was changed to maybe Lizard in New York or Dinosaur or something like that, I think this would have been looked fondly on a lot more as time has gone on. Not just nostalgia for, you know, us as Godzilla fans, because to be honest, the only nostalgia I feel for this movie is that this was the only Godzilla movie that my grandmother would have, and so I would have to watch this compared to no other Godzilla movies whenever I'd visit her. But what's cool about this copy is that this was the widescreen edition of the VHS. You know, a lot of people were trying to pioneer the whole widescreen thing, so they made these special copies of VHS. In fact, this one even says, you know, you can get a free Godzilla flashlight with a mail-in offer. So that's pretty cool. I think even this was a Blockbuster copy that you could have bought there. You see, $14.99, so that's pretty cool sticker there. I also have this other sealed copy of a Godzilla set. Now, this is one that I have a ton of nostalgia for, because not only did I have that other collection as a kid, but I had this collection as well, released by Similar Entertainment. And this was the editions that I grew up with. These are the box sets that I grew up with King of the Monsters, Godzilla vs. Mothra, Monster Zero, Godzilla's Revenge, or All Monsters Attack, or Terror of Mechagodzilla. These ones I love to death. I would watch these over and over and over again. In fact, I broke this copy on VHS when I was a kid because I rewound it so many times. And, you know, these are always included like a really cool description, you know, experience the legend of Godzilla with 5 classics from the first and best director, Ishiro Honda, spanning 20 years of monstrous destruction. These 5 videos feature superb images and sound taken directly from the original film prints. See the 400-foot behemoth battle Mothra, Ghidra, Titanosaurus, and Mechagodzilla. Ghidra, not Ghidorah. That was the original English version that they would use at times. And many more colossal beasts. From the depths of Tokyo Bay to the edge of the solar system, Godzilla truly is the king of the monsters. And then you would be able to see pictures of the movies. Just, you know, overall, I really enjoy the artwork that are on these VHS tapes. For example, here with Monster Zero, Godzilla looks a bit more T-Rex-like. Same thing for Godzilla vs. Mothra. Mechagodzilla looks pretty cool in that artwork. And then you have Manila here, which looks like he's smoking something. And now we come to the final thing in my sealed collection, Godzilla's Revenge. I have probably the most nostalgia for this Godzilla movie in particular. And I know that sounds weird because a lot of people tend to hate this movie a lot. But for me as a Godzilla fan when I was younger, I cared about the Godzilla fights. And it wasn't until Final Wars that kind of, you know, had something similar. But there wasn't something similar to this movie where almost every 5 seconds there's a Godzilla fight. Now, when I'm younger, I didn't really realize that they were reused scenes from Son of Godzilla or Godzilla versus the Sea Monster. But here, you know, I just really enjoyed this, and I always enjoyed the main villain Gabra as a kid, and same thing with the story, how it was just about a kid my age and his imagination with Godzilla, so it was pretty similar. But I've just always kind of enjoyed All Monsters Attack, especially the Americanized version, Godzilla's Revenge. So, yeah, you know, I've always kind of enjoyed my Godzilla VHS collection. Now, these are not my childhood VHS tapes, and as a matter of fact, my mother had sold all of my VHS tapes once DVDs started to be more prevalent. And I was quite mad at her because she didn't tell me, and also, at the time, some of these movies you could not find on DVD until it was released further down the line. So things like Godzilla 1985 or The Return of Godzilla. I think Godzilla's Revenge did not get released for quite a while on DVD. Same thing with other copies like Destroy All Monsters, Godzilla vs. Biollante. There was some that I had on DVD at the time, so it made sense to switch over, but I still didn't have every single movie on DVD yet, so I was pretty bummed out that my mom went and did that. So I think now I'm just kind of slowly reintroducing my collection to myself. I'm trying to find these, you know, if I walk into a thrift store or some marketplace app and they have them for 99 cents or $1, I'll probably swoop up and pick them up. They're very easy to find, especially some of the sealed copies. You would not believe how easy these are to find out in the wild. Same thing for some of these. I don't know if it's just me, but I've been very successful in finding these for very, very cheap. I know VHS recently has been a collector's item for some. For me, I look at it as nostalgia, you know, just not really the best picture, not really the best quality. I more so prefer that there's a physical copy I can hold in my hand. There's a physical, actual movie I can hold in my hand, and it's really cool to see how some of the artwork has changed over time.